president of an executive vice president who could probably act in a temporary capacity during the temporary absence of the president. For instance,
Well, that's
attending-
something we could consider if you it's as an amendment if you feel strongly about it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Good spot.
It's a matter, yes, I think it's a matter of policy, Mr. President. Okay. The president and the CEO of the bank may be removed for cause by the board. Does that removal affect his status as a member of the board?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr.
the-
Does that his removal affect his status?
The president is a member of the board chosen by the board.
Yes,
But the board, that same board can remove the president.
as president.
Yes, as president. So,
But he is appointed by the president of the Philippines. So I suppose if he's removed as president,
yes.
as from the position, he still remains
As a board
member of the board.
Okay. That's how we
Yes.
will interpret it. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Kasi the board is appointed by the president.
Mr. President, so of course we because of this measure we revisited issues about the DBP, and we have encountered the reports of some significant loans that they have written off, Mr. President. Number one, totoo ba ito? Are there significant loans that DBP has written off from its books, Mr. President?
Perhaps you could expand. There doesn't. I don't know of any significant write-offs. But we'll continue to check. But as of now, I'm not. They're not.
Can
we're
the
not aware of any.
DBP resource persons volunteer information on loans that they have written off, Mr. President, from their books?
Of course, we can provide that kind of information. In fact, we can send it now. But
Then, right now, Mr. President.
yes,
And then not in writing, but we have to talk about this, Mr. President. So, kasi ang subscriber ng shares ng DBP, national government, therefore people's money. So, DBP is people's bank. Nagpapautang ng milyon o bilyon. Tapos, merong mga board decision na ira-write off yung utang. So, hindi na babayaran si bank. So, ang hindi binabayaran yung taong bayan. So, may we know if nangyari na ito,
yes.
kanino nangyari ito, at bakit nangyari ito, Mr. President?
It's been according to the DBP. The last write-off has been a long time ago. We'll get the exact details, but not recently. And I think it's also important to note that, of course, in the course of the banking, a bank is it's a institution that it's a risk management institution where, of course, there are some you try your best to minimize the level of defaults, of course, and you have mechanisms to minimize that by getting collateral, by getting by securing the loans through hard assets. But in the end, I think there's really no 100%. I mean, in the banking industry, you try to achieve 100%. You don't always achieve 100%. And that's part of the course of business. But I think based on my talks with the DBP, of recent memory, there has not been, or of recent history, there has not been a major write-off in the bank. So,
Yes,
as of now.
And of course, when they render the report or give us the report, they can state the year and then under whose leadership, kasi hindi naman sa current leadership yan. I mean, klarong-klaro po yun. But I think the current leadership, since this is still the People's Bank, if asked, should tell the people, ito yung nangyari 10 years ago, 15 years ago, billion, write-off, ito po yung umutang, hindi na po siya kailangang magbayad nitong billion na utang, at ano yung binigay na reason nung board na dati, hindi yung present board. But just a general question, Mr. President. pag re-write off na ng DBP or ng government bank ang isang utang, tama ba ako sa sinabi ko na hindi na babayaran yun ng umutang, Mr. President?
It's always when you do such a thing, it's always without prejudice to collection efforts. But in terms of your declaration, if there's your financial statements, if you don't believe, if you want to be as accurate as possible to the a real financial situation. So if the management deems the collection of this a certain receivable as very for whatever reason bankruptcy of the company, or for something happened to the original whoever availed of the loan, then that's if they decide that it's not the chances of a collection, then financially you have to write it off so that your financial statements reflect the financial health of your. That's not without prejudice. You can still collect it,
Yes.
but to be financially prudent in your reporting, writing an off is a tool that they use.
Yes, and then in the effort to collect, what if they actually collect something, although let's say not the full amount, it will be subsequently reported in the books as what?
Yes, it
As
will.
what?
It will
As
be
what?
income. It will be part of the income of the bank.
Income ba yan?
Yes.
Income. Okay.
In accounting terms, maybe they call it extraordinary income.
Income. Sige.
Yeah.
Okay, it will be reflected. So
Yes.
yan siguro I think that DBP
Can I just add, just so for the record, write-offs are also subject to COA audit as an additional safeguard. Just as a
COA,
audit.
not COA approval, but COA
COA
audit na lang.
audit.
Audit.
Yeah.
Sige po. Is part of the COA audit making sure that there are efforts to collect initiated by the DBP?
Yes, there's always. I think every bank has that. That is also part of their ongoing operations. It's always trying to collect. No matter what, there's always tools by which they can collect from their debtors, but from their clients. But of course, it's not always an exact science.
But Mr. President, how come nga when we ask for a report from DBP of debt write-offs, bakit hindi po sila makabigay agad? I mean, di ba dapat computerized na po lahat yan, Mr. President? Lalo na walang nangyari recently.
I think I'm not sure about the circumstances, but they reassured me, and it should be, because these are not difficult. I mean, that should be part of the record. So I don't know specifically what happened, Mr. President, but rest assured that this information can be given soon.
Mr. President, kasi merong Section 34 which is about the transfer of assets and liabilities of the DBP. Meron ditong what is the interpretation or explanation of the sponsor on Section 34? What is this all about, Mr. President?
On Section 34 of Senate Bill number 2864, the provision can be interpreted as to adopt a policy of yielding to the authority of the ultimate owner of DBP as a GOCC, the state acting through the national government. In any case, the provision will not result in taxpayer bailout of private commercial interests. Since under Section 7 of the proposed charter, the national government would at all times retain at least 70% of the outstanding capital stock of DBP. The possibility of write-off is embedded in the terms of Section 34, but is left ultimately to the discretion of the national government, in the same way that the terms of the transfer in general is subject to mutual approval of the bank and national government.
Section 34, Mr. President, I'm sorry to admit, I think I need to read this 20 times to understand this, Mr. President. Pero just to get from the sponsor, there is a mention of appropriate authorities, page 14, line 9. Who are those appropriate authorities, Mr. President?
Yes, actually, I spoke to them. I spoke to the DBP about this particular, and it's part of the amendments that we'll be proposing is to remove this from the, as it is not part of the existing charter of other GFIs such as LBP, Land Bank of the Philippines.
The entire section.
So yes, 34 and 35 of the committee report. Yes.
What would be our upcoming action on sections 34 and 35? We will delete them.
Deletion.
We will delete them. So okay. Sige po, hindi na ako magtatanong sa section na hindi ko naintindihan kung i-delete din po natin. Opo. So Mr. President, ang authorized, so magli-listing din tayo sa stock exchange. So at all times, national government will own 70% of the total outstanding capital stock. So ano yung sabihin? 30% lang po yung iti-trade sa ano?
Basically, when they do an offering, they can only sell a stake of 30% at most. There's a ceiling in a super majority of the ownership.
So there will now be private individuals or even private corporations which will be stockholders or co-owners of DBP.
Yes, that is correct.
Up to the extent of a
Owners of DBP,
Yes, that is correct.
up to the extent of a ceiling of 30%.
Yes, that is correct.
So, Mr. President, if I could suspend my interpellation until after I get to see the written report on the loan write-offs of the DBP, plus, of course, a mention of their subsequent action siguro, effort to collect on the loan, Mr. President. And sabihin na natin na these write-offs did not happen during the term of the current leadership. So, wag po silang matakot that they will be blamed, wag silang mahiya that they will be blamed because hindi naman to nangyari sa time nila. But nagtataka lang kami how come a report is so difficult to get. Meron po ako nabasa na, or chismis lang ba ito, na nung Lehman Brothers collapse, tinamaan daw ang DBP. Can we get an official response from the DBP? Spread into the records of the Philippine Senate. Sana accurate po ang sagot.
May exposure ba kayo sa Lehman Brothers? What? In what? In what form? What year was that? So I believe it was around that time during the crisis, that Asian crisis, I believe 2008, the DBP purchased a bond issued by Lehman Brothers, I believe. I'm not, but there was exposure. You bought it 2008 or? Sorry, my mistake. I said 2008. They bought it earlier. And as you know, in 2008, as we all know, in 2008, that's when the financial crisis hit. But yes, there was exposure to a bond issued by Lehman Brothers, and it was purchased before the crisis of 2008.
Magkano po? Magkano ang tama ng DBP? Sakay mababasa.
Yes, we can provide you with the exact. I don't want to give details that aren't 100% correct. But more or less, what we know is that they did purchase prior to 2008, prior to the crisis, bonds issued by Lehman Brothers, and are of course pursuing. They had pursued the receivables from that, but unfortunately, there's no closure yet because, as you know. Lehman Brothers collapsed, one of the banks that collapsed during the crisis.
When when the DBP bought bonds, parang nagpautang din sila, no? The issuer of the bond is the debtor, di ba? Tama? Nagpautang yun, di ba? Parang pautang din po yun.
Well, no, when you buy the bonds, it's you're deploying well, usually banks, you do that, they deploy investable funds to purchase various financial instruments. And I think, to be fair, at the time, Lehman Brothers was up to that point where it was exposed
Yes,
in the 2008. It was considered a very safe investment, probably, probably the high grade investment prior to what happened in 2008 because of the subprime crisis.
Yes.
But prior to that, to be fair, there's the Lehman Brothers. Prior to that, was considered a very safe investment. Unfortunately, we all know what happened during the crisis.
Underlying a bond issuance is actually a loan transaction, di ba? Kasi a bond is a promise to pay principal plus interest, di ba?
Yeah, it's a basically in a way.
Okay,
Yes, it's a different
It's a
way.
loan,
Yes,
okay.
it's a basically a loan. It's a
Ngayon,
loan.
for those of us interested in the documentation of DBP's engagement with Lehman Brothers, where can we find this? Is there a brochure, a study, a paper issued, or a website on that, Mr. President?
Sorry, a website on.
Can we ask the DBP? Ito yung the DBP's exposure to Lehman Brothers. I'm sure, nung pumutok siguro yan, tinamaan sila. We cannot even state the amount kung magkano. I'm sure they initiated some investigation. And I'm sure they documented the results of their investigation. For those of us who are interested in pursuing the issue or knowing more about the issue, is there some publication that we can access, Mr. President? A book, a magazine, a report,
of course,
a website?
I'm sure we can always look into, we can submit because there's always reporting every year. Banks are required to do these reporting every year, so I'm sure we can look at the archives and find it. And if I knew in advance, I would have prepared.
They confirm
Yes.
it that
They can
there
find
is-
it. They can find it. So hopefully we can if we can get it in advance so that we can ask them to retrieve these files because that was 16 years ago.
Yes.
So
So,
it's,
kaya nga, Mr. President, and then we are, siyempre, and they were, siguro at that time, their authorized capital stock was 35 billion.
Yeah.
Pa rin. But now, we want them 300 billion. And then we give them authority to even increase their authorized capital stock on their own. May mga ganitong pangyayari na we need to understand before we approve everything, Mr. President. Yun lang yung concern ko, Mr. President. I just need to understand, but I do not know if that is shared by our colleagues.
I think
Mr.
to be
President.
fair, during when we do when we do our actuarial analysis of our investments, it's always prudent to have a wide range of investments in various, perhaps even internationally, locally. This is just part of the prudent risk management. So there's nothing irregular about investing in international institutions. This is also to spread the risk. This is also for the benefit of the depositors. And also, to be fair, and also it was the financial crisis happened in 2008. The time that they invested in these bonds, I'm not sure, but it might have probably it was even way before that. So it could have been that it's been I'm just speculating, but it could be that they've been investing in these instruments for a much longer time and they've been benefiting them for a long time. But as in, you always have when it comes to risk management, there are always these occurrences that might happen that you cannot anticipate. So it's all part of the risk management strategy of the bank. It's hard. You wouldn't say that it's a deliberate, but the reality is that is precisely why it could happen locally. There could have been some issue that happens locally. It just so happened that it happened internationally. Not to say that they didn't invest prudently. It's just that that's part of that's precisely why you have a wide range of investments. So should something happen like that there's some sort of crisis or something, at least your risk is spread out. So I mean, just to be fair to the bank.
But for those of us interested, meron po ba public?
But yes, we can provide the information. It's just
last question na lang siguro, Miss, for this particular time. May we know what lessons DBP learned from their hit from the Lehman collapse, Mr. President?
I think it's the same lesson that we all learned. The issue of subprime was something that very few people up to the last minute were able to anticipate. You know, the banks were issuing debt that was grade AAA, but it wasn't. Even though it was grade AAA, the reality is the underlying assets of those bonds were not AAA, but they were declared as investment grade. And a lot of people did not see that. You know, they always assume mortgages are very safe instruments because people are buying houses and people pay that. Unfortunately, during that crisis, that's what happened. And I don't think, to be fair, very few people were able to anticipate that happening during the time. And of course, we can come up, I'm sure the DBP can readily explain their investment strategies. But on my part, I understand why they would spread out their investments in international and institutions. A lot of people were affected by that, not just a lot of people were bought instruments that they thought was AAA, that was graded by Moody's, it was graded by very respected agencies as AAA, and yet it didn't turn out that way. But again, that's part of risk management. That's not to say that there was fund misuse, but I think that's just part of the banking. That's the part of the banking industry, that there is risk involved, and sometimes you can't control every aspect of your investments.
So yung mga AAA po are given by rating agencies, almost all of them, of course, foreign, non-Filipino. So you mean to say our best bankers, our best investors at the DBP merely relied blindly on the ratings given by these foreign rating agencies? Or wala ba tayong ka-effort to say na, oops, teka muna, hindi yan AAA?
No, I
yan?
think
Basura yan?
to be fair, it wasn't just, there are several rating agencies who declared subprime as investment grade instruments. So to be fair, it's not blind. I wouldn't, maybe the terminology of blindly would be unfair to them. I think, you know, it was that was a very particular crisis caused by a very series of events that a lot of people were not able to anticipate. Even the best financial analysts in the world, all the major banks were not able to anticipate that. So to be fair to the DB, I'm just saying in terms of if we're gonna question how they handled that, I think to be fair, it was something that was internationally. It was a circumstance that was internationally very few people were able to predict.
Yes, almost the entire world was fooled by
Yes. And to be
by
fair,
these reputable rating
Yes.
agencies, Mr. President.
yes, and to be fair, Mr. President, all these we learned. A lot of financial agencies learned. The BSP learned from this crisis, and they've adjusted their risk management policies to reflect what we learned from this crisis. As we do in many financial crises, there's always lessons to be learned. And the BSP has revised their policies with regards to the investment activities of our GFIs. And the risk of such an event occurring again, of course, will be very minimal.
Sige po, but ulitin ko po, for those of us, maybe hindi lang itong representation, maybe mga nanonood sa ating mga kababayan natin who want to read up on this particular issue, I hope the DBP can point to us the reference material or give us the reference material. So we'll know what happened, how much. Bakit yung amount, Mr. President, hindi natin masabi? Kasi it happened
I think
decades ago. How much was the financial hit of or setback of DBP from its investment or bond subscription with Lehman Brothers?
I've been made aware that the investment was $90 million US. Yes, $90 million US.
9 or
90
90
90.
Okay, at that time siguro we can safely put it at 50 pesos siguro by that during that time. Okay. So thank you for that information, Mr. President. Yun lang po yung gusto lang namin po malaman, dito yung mga debt write-offs din po at kasi nga we are going to grant the DBP a new charter. Siguro it's just right to review past performance. But that's my logical approach, Mr. President. We're just looking at past performance. Parang budget season din ito na how did you use your budget? So during the time that you
Yes.
had authorized capital stock of 35 billion pesos. This was your mandate. How did you use your capital stock? How did you use your mandate? How do you exercise your mandate? Ganon din po, Mr. President. So,
Yes, Mr.
yun
President.
na
I
lang
think,
po, yun na lang po siguro yung pending request ko po on materials on the two issues, the debt write-offs and then the Lehman Brothers exposure, Mr. President. But in the meantime, yes, in the meantime, with the permission of the Senate President, if we could suspend, tapos pag nasabit na, madaanan na natin, this representation can manifest na kung wala na po akong further interpellation, pwede rin po mangyari yun. But pwede rin po magka-further interpellation, pero kakonti na lang po, limited na po dun sa dalawang topics na yun, Mr. President. So with that, Mr. President, this representation would like to suspend this interpellation on this measure.
Thank you, Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2804.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. The chair would like to seek a minute suspension. Session suspended.